nation and no country can grow or sustain its development without employing mentoring as an important element in its toolbox. My remarks today will be based on my own experiences, which I'm delighted to share with you. In any case, once you are 80 plus, believe me, you have nothing less but to tell stories. And I'll tell you stories of my experiences, A, as a mentee, as a beneficiary of mentoring, B, as a mentor who has mentored several, and thirdly, as a keen student of a country, Singapore, where I spent some time as a visiting professor in one of the universities there and observed really how a nation has transformed itself in the lifetime of the founding father, Lee Kuan Yew, from a third world country to a first world country. And the secret, if any, is needed, is the role of leadership and mentoring in national development. First, my own experience. Some of you might be wondering, how can an 80-year-old man plus say is a mentee of mentoring? Well, let me start from the beginning. Alhaji Sir Ahmadu Bello, Sadano of Sokoto, the first and only premier of the then northern Nigeria, now 19 northern states, believed in mentoring. And he carefully selected people who helped him to administer the whole of the then northern Nigeria. He motivated people, and he led by example. Mentoring is actually a leadership by example, transmitting values, ideas, knowledge, and skills from one generation to another. Now, this Ahmadu Bello united the whole of the then northern region. A region containing Muslims, Christians, Fulani, Hausa, Yoruba, Kanuris, Nupe, Ibiras, into one community, called this One North, One People. And that transmission of ideas and values, particularly including, especially of integrity, has been his watchword. He decided at that time that the only federal government, you now know of many unity schools all over Nigeria, but at that time, and his time, there was only one federal government boys' school, secondary school, and that was King's College, but there were no northerners. He decided the time has come to select northerners who will go to do their A-levels in King's College and show the rest of Nigeria that the North can also produce brilliant young students. I was one of the beneficiaries of that foresight. And tell you what, almost all the years from my time downwards, the best results A-levels in King's College were guessed by the Northern boys. Then, another person who played a major role in my life and in my growth and education was the principal of that King's College. And he used to also mentor by example. He would walk past us, and some of us were, believe it or not, very rascally at that time, and he would come quietly and say, those who are supposed to uphold the school rules are themselves breaking them. And that lesson is very important, that those who are privileged, and we were privileged, have a tremendous responsibility to maintain law and order and good running of the school. Second person that had tremendous influence as a mentee was Professor F.S. Northedge. He was a famous professor of international relations. My specialization was international relations, but Bachelor of Science degree in economics at the London School of Economics. And he called me one day, he said, Ibrahim, I've just produced the best book on British foreign policy in between World War I and World War II. It's the best book written ever. He has not seen anything near. So I told him, I said, sir, I know I will have to buy this book. Maybe that's why you are telling me, because I won't pass your course if I don't. But aren't you blowing your trumpet? And he said to me, And I'd like to share with you, said, if you don't blow your trumpet, nobody will blow it for you because they are too busy blowing their own trumpet. And that goes into our identity as Africans. If we don't blow our own trumpet, if we don't define who we are and what our aims are, what we want from the world, our identities will be given to us by others. That is why, for a long time, you see, particularly the Western country, referring to Africa as the dark continent. In fact, there was a screaming headline in the weekly journal, The Economist, not very long ago, entitled Africa, the Hopeless Continent. That's how they chose to define us, you know. Africa with the huge potential, and they keep talking about Africa's potential 200, 300 years from now, unless we translate that potential into actuality, and unless we begin to define ourselves. That is why Ibrahim Bello was quite right, that we must define who we are, what we stand for, what we are contributing to the world, and what we'll get from it. So that's the kind of mentoring that I believe is very important and mobilizes and encourages the others that follow. Third source of mentoring was at the United Nations, where the first United Nations Secretary General from Africa was Boutros Ghali. The second from the African continent and from so-called sub-Saharan Africa was Kofi Annan, our neighbor. It was from Ghana. And they wrote two classics, An Agenda for Peace, a big report, which argued that without peace, there can be no development. This was followed by An Agenda for Development, which argued there will be no durable peace without sustainable development. And then Kofi Annan came with Enlarged Freedom, in which he argued that there will neither be durable peace nor sustainable development without respect for human rights and without democracy, people having the right to choose the government under which they want to live, and through good governance. So, in the United Nations, for the 10 years that I served as ambassador, for the another 7 years that I served as Under-Secretary General of the UN, the linkage between peace, development, and democracy sank. And that's why when I retired from there, I came back home, I tried to domesticate those principles that I learned from the masters, who are the two Secretary Generals of the United Nations from our continent, and domesticated it by establishing the Savannah Center right there in Abuja to demonstrate that linkage between peace, development, and democracy. Now, that was me as a mentee, a recipient of mentoring from the highest level. Now, who have I mentored and how? Coming back to Ahmadu Bello University as first senior lecturer, later on a professor, I started, which did not exist, a program of international studies, where I selected people from the regular intake into the Department of Political Science into a new section, a degree program in international studies. Many of my students, I'm very proud to say, have become professors in their own right. Two of them have been governors of states. Several of them have been ambassadors, federal permanent secretaries, state permanent secretaries. But the language, what I left with them, I hope I left, that in foreign affairs, you cannot have a strong foreign policy if you have a weak domestic policy. You cannot be weak at home and strong abroad. So linkage between domestic politics and domestic situation and the external projection of your influence. The second, that you cannot exercise influence in foreign affairs without what I call concentric circles of interest and influence. First, starting with our neighbors. First, Nigeria is the centerpiece. That is, our security, our prosperity, our status is at the core. But the next in that circle is our neighboring countries, because what happens there affects our security, our development, and our status in the world. Then West Africa, then Africa, and then the rest of the world. So I was able to, in my view, transmit my knowledge, my experience, my values, my skills through those whom I've been privileged to mentor. Now, at the global level of experience, I mentioned Singapore. Lee Kuan Yew, when he was forced to establish an independent state of Singapore from Malaysia, he wept. How am I going to feed these people? We have nothing, no resources. We have to even import water. But guess what? In his lifetime, he transformed a sleepy city-state seaport into one of the most dynamic economies in the world, from the third world to the first world. How did he do it? Through mentoring and leadership by example. He did not tolerate corruption. He paid all the civil servants the same kind of wages that they would earn if they were in the private sector, and therefore said there was no basis for corruption. If you are corrupt as a civil servant, you are going to be sacked, if not even imprisoned. So integrity, hard work, and molded a multi-ethnic community. Chinese are there in Singapore, Malays are there, Indians are there, but they are molded Singapore to what it is today through mentoring by emphasizing what unites them rather than what divides them. And this is, in my view, those are the basis of the experiences that I've had. And in particular, I want to share with you a lesson that I will not forget while I was there as a visiting professor, as I mentioned, for close to a year. I was sitting next to the chairman of the Public Service Commission of Singapore. So I asked him, Mr. Chairman, what are the challenges and what are the major issues that you handle as chairman of the Public Service Commission of Singapore? I expected him to say, problem of recruitment, problem of promotion, problem of discipline. He said, we are past that. So I said, what do you do? What do you then do as a Public Service Commission? He said, we go to secondary school all over Singapore, and we identify students with talents, even at that level. And we begin from that level to mentor them, to give them scholarship, to give them training, to send them to the best educational institutions, so that we will know in the next 25 years the kind of quality of public servant or even those who go into the private sector that Singapore will have and Singapore will need, because to sustain its wealth in a region of sometimes chaos and confusion and conflict, we have to maintain our prosperity, to make our standing. We definitely have to train and mentor and identify. Sadly, you look at us. We have no idea who is going to be permanent secretary, what kind of training they will have when they become permanent secretary, or when they become ministers or ambassadors or whatever. So my argument is that we must take mentoring seriously. And mentoring means nothing more than personal leadership by example, and transmission of values, of integrity, of hard work. That is indispensable. So in my view, therefore, mentoring is not just important as a tool for social and economic development, but it's an indispensable tool. That is why I believe that your team capturing the future, reclaiming the future. You cannot reclaim the future unless you reclaim the past in terms of the successes that mentoring brings or can bring to a nation or a society. I thank you very much.